Hi, I'm Steffany Strange. Want to hear something scary?
In the early 1920s, a young nurse named Eulalia began working at the Hospital Juarez. She was devoted to her patients and extremely tidy, her uniform perfectly ironed and not a hair out of place. One day, a new doctor arrived named Joaquin. He was charming and immediately took a liking to Eulalia. She ignored his advances, as many of the other nurses warned that he was a ladies' man. But after long shifts and late nights working together, romance found a way, and the two began secretly seeing each other. This was Eulalia's first love, the kind that sweeps you away and engulfs you at the same time. The doctor was called away for a 2-week seminar. He asked Eulalia if she would press all of his clothes and help him pack, complimenting her talent at keeping a wardrobe pristine. She lovingly obliged and sent him on his way. Within days, she felt the pain of missing him, so after months of secrecy, she confided in a fellow nurse. The nurse, alarmed, had some terrible news. Joaquin wasn't at a seminar. Joaquin was getting married and would be on his honeymoon for 2 weeks. He then put in his resignation at Hospital Juarez to work closer to his wife's family. Eulalia felt ill. She had never felt this pain before. A deep melancholy settled in, and when she would work, she frequently made mistakes. Those mistakes got worse and worse until one night, a patient died because she gave them medication they were allergic to. The guilt was unbearable. She saw no way out, and using her medical know-how, ended her own life. The staff found her body lying on top of the hospital bed of the patient she had accidentally killed. She laid there, her uniform crisp white. Such a tragedy. Everyone mourned. A few years later, the now married Dr. Joaquin returned to the hospital. No one spoke a word about Eulalia to him, but everyone knew. He could feel their judgment. This is when strange things began to happen. Whenever the doctor was alone in the hospital, the temperature would drop. He was followed by disembodied whispers, and a few times, medical instruments would drop on the floor around him. Then, in the dead of night, the doctor was called in for an emergency surgery. While performing the surgery, it felt like someone was standing behind him the entire time. The surgery went well, but the patient had lost too much blood. There was almost no chance of survival. Yet, when the doctor returned the next morning, the staff was all abuzz. The patient was sitting up and preening for the nurses. His vitals were perfect. The old man saw the surprise on the doctor's face. Astounded, the doctor said how the staff here are very good at what they do. The man then said,
"Especially the young nurse. The one who stayed with me all night."
The doctor looked confused, as all the female nurses were older. The old man clarified,
"The pretty one, with the perfect uniform. Eulalia. She said her name was Eulalia."
Chills ran down the doctor's spine. Terrified, he left to hide in his office. He locked the door and even braced a chair under the doorknob, then listened at it to see if he could hear anything. Nothing. It was silent. He caught his breath, then felt eyes piercing through his back. As he slowly turned around, there she was, standing there, inches from his face. Eulalia. She looked the same, but her eyes were hollowed out, filled with blackness. He couldn't speak. He went to reach out to her, almost lovingly. She grabbed his hand with one hand, and from behind her back, she pulled out an iron. She pulled him to her, and taking the red-hot iron, slammed it into his face. He screamed and screamed as she kept pressing the iron all over his body. Smoke lifted from it. his skin scorched onto the surface of it. He couldn't escape her grasp, nor the searing heat of the molten metal. This went on for almost an hour. And just outside the door, the entire staff, hearing his cries for help, carried on as if they hadn't heard a peep. To this day, his death in that locked room has never been officially explained. As for the hospital, patients have started calling a presence that appears at night the Ironed Lady, or La Planchada. And since Eulalia's ghostly return, not a single patient has died in the middle of the night, and every morning, the nurses' uniforms are laid out, bright white, and pressed to perfection. Alex and Marla were excited for their family's vacation to Brazil. It had been Anna's idea, a chance for their fractured family to bond. Of Alex and Marla's 2 children, Anna was their golden child, well-behaved and very clever with straight A's. Her older brother Seb was, well, the opposite, in both grades and in maturity. Anna had also been born deaf, and Seb resented her for that as well. No matter how his parents tried to reward or discipline him, he always seemed to push back. He would claim that although he'd come first, he felt second best. Along with healing their family dynamic, Alex and Marla hoped this vacation would help Seb garner some control over his increasingly hostile behavior, especially towards his sister. They landed in Sao Paulo and took a bus to a beautiful campsite. As they drove through the entrance, they saw a sign that read Vida Melhor, that meant better life, and it was. The site had its own lake and the cabins were charming. They were a day ahead of the usual vacationing crowds, so would even have a peaceful night all to themselves. But heading over to check-in, the signs posted became more ominous. In capital letters, they warned campers to pick up after themselves and to respect the grounds, because if they did not, they would face the wrath of the Curupira. Alex and Marla chuckled. What a cute way to remind guests not to drop trash. But Anna was curious and Googled Curupira on her phone. Hey, so a Curupira does exist, she continued. It's a mythical creature whose name means covered in blisters. It has red and orange hair. Its feet are backwards as a way to throw off anything hunting after it. As she read aloud, her parents smiled, but Seb just rolled his eyes. Nobody asked you. That's so dumb, he scoffed. Well, let's hope we don't make it mad then, Anna warned. It says here that it gives off a high-pitched noise that can make people go insane. Kicking at some loose dirt, Seb grabbed his stuff and stormed into the cabin. That evening, it was clear Seb wasn't having a good time. He didn't want to swim or fish with everyone else and complained 24/7. The rest of the family was having a blast, while Seb became increasingly agitated. After dinner, Alex, Marla, and Anna sat around a fire pit making s'mores and looking out over the lake. It was blissful until Seb appeared, his negative energy immediately dampening the mood. He teased Anna about still enjoying kid snacks, then grabbed her treat and threw it into the water. When Anna got upset over him bullying her yet again, Seb stormed off, kicking a trash can onto the ground, causing its contents to spill everywhere. At his mother's look, Seb then sneered and ran inside the cabin, slamming the door. Anna begged and pleaded to sleep with her parents tonight, just in case Seb tried to take it out on her. Alex shook his head, saying he'd be taking Seb fishing early in the morning so they could talk it out. He asked Marla to make sure Anna would be okay tonight. Later that night, there was rustling outside of Seb's bedroom window. Then a tapping, as if someone was trying to get his attention. He sat up groggily, just as a shadow passed by the window. Figuring it was some type of a prank, Seb jumped from his bed to see who was messing with him. He crept out the front door and looked around. There was nobody there. He turned to go back inside and was quickly shoved to the ground. Looking back over his shoulder, his indignation turned to abject fear. The Curupira loomed over him. Covered in bright orange hair like a Sasquatch, its face was half human and half animal. Its mouth opened, revealing 3-inch-long teeth, and it let out a horrific wail. Seb covered his ears, but it was no use. The resonating noise made him feel like red-hot needles were being poked into his brain. Alex startled awake at an unearthly howl and rushed out of the main bedroom. He checked on Anna first. She was still loudly snoring away with Marla asleep next to her wearing earplugs. He saw Seb's room was empty and tiptoed outside. He saw a giant, hairy creature picking something up, maybe some type of large animal, and slamming it down repeatedly over a stump. Usually, he would run away at such a sight, but something compelled him forward. And that's when he saw that this monstrous orange thing had Seb, his son. His body lay twisted over the stump, his back and neck broken. Howling himself, Alex grabbed a heavy branch and ran towards this murderous thing. The creature lobbed him into a huge tree, killing him instantly. Anna and Marla slept on, totally unaware of what had transpired. The next morning, Marla walked through the empty cabin. "Alex? Seb?" she called out, wondering where they could be. Then she stepped outside and saw the carnage. There was so much blood, and that was when it sank in and she started to scream. Other campers were arriving and heard her, quickly rushing to her aid, alerting the authorities and moving her away from the distressing scene. Anna was still rubbing the sleep out of her eyes as her mother ran in and engulfed her in an embrace. Her mother held her, shaking as she tearfully tried to explain and sign what had happened. Anna looked shocked, and she buried her face into her mom's chest. And there, her expression quickly turned to satisfaction. As it was Anna who had chosen this place to begin with, having researched the Curupira, she knew how her horrific bully of a brother would behave, and she knew that her inability to hear the fatal screech would keep her and her parents safe, who wore earplugs at night whenever she slept with them due to her loud snoring. Her dad, Alex, had been an unfortunate byproduct of her plan, but she had begged them both, and because her dad had allowed Seb to get away with so much bullying, it seemed only fair in the end. Now it was just her and her mom.
A long time ago, in a rural village in Mexico, lived a young woman named Maria. She came from an impoverished family, but was known throughout the village for her beauty. One day, a wealthy nobleman was riding through the village and stopped in his tracks. He had traveled all over the world, but had never seen anyone quite like Maria. He knew he had to win her over. Maria was easily charmed by this smooth-talking man and accepted his immediate proposal of marriage. Maria's family was thrilled that she'd be marrying such a wealthy man, but the nobleman's arrogant father would not be so excited about this arrangement. So the nobleman built Maria a house in the village where they could be together without his father's knowledge. She eventually gave birth to 2 twin boys. The nobleman traveled a lot and left Maria in the house with the boys most of the time. At first, he brought many gifts back from his trips and was a devoted husband. But every time he left and came back, he grew colder and more distant to Maria, to the point where he would only give the boys his attention. Maria began to suspect that he was falling out of love with her, since she was getting older and was not as beautiful as she used to be. Years later, her husband stopped returning home. Maria was devastated. She really did love him. Rumors began to spread around the village, and Maria's reputation was tainted. Even more years had passed. Maria was walking with her children along the river when a familiar horse-drawn carriage pulled up beside them. It was her ex-husband, but sitting next to him was a beautiful young woman wearing very expensive clothing. The nobleman greeted the children and made it very obvious that he was intentionally ignoring Maria. It was clear to her now why he had left. He had found a younger, wealthier woman, one that his father would be proud of. They rode away, leaving Maria in complete shock. How could he disrespect her like that? She was angry and humiliated and brokenhearted all at once. Without thinking, she hurled her young boys into the raging water. It wasn't until she saw their floating bodies downriver that she realized what she had done. Distraught, she threw herself in too, in hopes that she could be reunited with them in the afterlife. However, that was not the case. Maria had committed the ultimate sins, murder and suicide. So now she is forced to roam the earth between the physical and spiritual worlds, forever searching in vain for her children. She is called La Llorona, the Weeping Woman. To this day, people claim to see her by the river at night. When you hear her cries, take it as a warning and run. If she approaches you, she will bring you bad luck and misfortune. Children must be extra careful. She might confuse you for one of her own. And when she realizes that you are not her son, she will throw you into the river. Beware the cries of La Llorona.
Thanks so much for listening. Like and share if this video gave you the chills. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell for notifications. See you next time.